During the Rwandan Genocide of 1994, members of the Hutu ethnic majority in the East Central African nation of Rwanda murdered as many as 800,000 people, mostly of the Tutsi minority. Started by Hutu nationalists in the capital of Kigali, the genocide spread throughout the country, with shocking speed and brutality as ordinary citizens were incited by local officials and the Hutu power government to take up arms against their neighbors. By the time the Tutsi-led Rwandanese Patriotic Front gained control of the country, through a military offensive in early July, hundreds of thousands of Rwandans were dead, and 2 million refugees, mainly Hutus, fled Rwanda, exacerbating what had already become a full-blown humanitarian crisis. By the early 1990s, Rwanda is a small country with an overwhelming agricultural economy and had one of the highest population densities in Africa. About 85% of its population was Hutu and the rest were Tutsi, along with a small number of Twa, a polygamy group who were the original inhabitants of Rwanda. Rwanda was part of German East Africa from 1894 to 1918, and Rwanda came under the League of Nations since mandate of Belgium after World War I, along with neighboring Burundi. Rwanda's colonial period, during which the ruling Belgians favored the minority, Tutsis over the Hutus, exacerbated the tendency of the few to the oppressed, the many creating a legacy of tension that it can exploit into violence even before Rwanda gained its independence. A Hutu revolution in 1959 forced as many as 300,000 Tutsis to flee the country, making them even a smaller minority. By early 1961, the Hutus won the revolution and forced Rwanda's Tutsi monarch into exile and declared the country a republic after a United Nations referendum that same year. Belgium officially granted independence to Rwanda in July 1962. Ethnically motivated violence continued in the years following independence. In 1973, a military group installed Major General Juvenal Habyarimana, a moderate Hutu, in power. He would be the sole leader of the Rwandan government for the next 2 decades. Habyarimana founded a new political party, the National Revolutionary Movement for Development, or the NRMD. He was elected president under a new constitution ratified in 1978 and re-elected in 1983 and 1988, when he was the sole candidate. In 1990, forces of the Rwandanese Patriotic Front, or the RPF, consisting mostly of the Tutsi refugees, invaded Rwanda from Uganda. A ceasefire in these hostilities led to negotiations between the government and the RPF. In 1992, August 1993, Habyarimana signed an agreement at Arusha, Tanzania, for calling for the creation of a transition government that would include the RPF. This power-sharing agreement angered Hutu extremists, would soon take swift and horrible action to prevent it. On April 6, 1994, a plane carrying Habyarimana and Burundi's president, Cyprien Ntaryamira, God, I hope I pronounced that name right, was shot down over the capital city of Kigali, leaving no survivors. Now, it was never been conclusively determined who were the culprits, some have blamed Hutu extremists, others blamed leaders of the RPF. And within an hour of the plane crash, the Presidential Guard, together with the members of the Rwandan Armed Forces, or the FAR, and the Hutu militia groups known as the Interahamwe, meaning those who attack together, and the Impazamanungambi, meaning those have the same goal. They set up roadblocks and barricades and began slaughtering Tutsis and moderate Hutus with impunity. Among the first victims of the genocide were the moderate Hutu Prime Minister, Ate Wilingimimana, and her 10 Belgian bodyguards killed on April 7th. This violence created a political vacuum into which an interim government of extremist Hutu power leaders from the military high command stepped on April 9th. The mass killings in Kigali quickly spread from that city to the rest of Rwanda, with some 800,000 people slaughtered over the next 3 months. During this period, local officials and government-sponsored radio stations called on ordinary Rwandan civilians to murder their own neighbors. Meanwhile, the RPF resumed fighting and civil war raged alongside the genocide. By early July, RPF forces had gained control over most of the country, including Kigali. In response, more than 2 million people, nearly all Hutus, fled to Rwanda and crowding into refugee camps in the Congo, well, back then it was called Zaire, and other neighboring countries. After its victory, the RPF established a coalition government, similar to that agreed upon at Arusha, with Pasteur Bizimungu, a Hutu, as president, and Paul Kagame, a Tutsi, as vice president and defense minister. Habyarimana's NRMD party, which had played a key role in organizing the genocide, was outlawed and a new constitution adopted in 2003 eliminated a reference to ethnicity. The new constitution was followed by Kagame's election to a 10-year term as Rwanda's president, and the country's first ever legislative elections. As in the case of atrocities committed in the former Yugoslavia region, around the same time, the international community largely remained on the sidelines during the Rwandan Genocide. A United Nations Security Council vote in April 1994 led to the withdrawal of most of a UN peacekeeping operation, or the UNAMIR, created the previous fall to aid with government transition under Arusha Accord. As the reports of the genocide spread, the Security Council voted in mid-May to supply a more robust force, including more than 5,000 troops. By that time, the force arrived in full, however. The genocide has been over for months. In a separate French intervention approved by the UN, French troops entered Rwanda from there in late June. In the face of the RPF's rapid advance, they limited their intervention into a humanitarian zone set up in southwestern Rwanda, saving tens of thousands of Tutsi lives, but also helping some of the genocide's plotters and allies of the French during the Habyarimana administration to escape. In the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, many prominent figures in the international community lamented the outside world's general obliviousness to the situation and its failure to act in order to prevent the atrocities from taking place. As in former UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali told the PBS News program called Frontline, quote, "The failure of Rwanda is 10 times greater than the failure of Yugoslavia, because in Yugoslavia the international community was interested and was involved. In Rwanda, nobody was interested," end quote. Two attempts were later made to rectify this passivity after the RFP victory, and the UNAMIR operation was brought back up to strength. It remained in Rwanda until March 1996, and as one of the largest humanitarian relief efforts in history. In October 1994, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, or the ICTR, located in Tanzania, was established as an extension of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, or ICTY, at The Hague. The first international tribunal was since the Nuremberg trials of 1945 and 46, and the first with the mandate to prosecute the crime of a genocide. In 1995, the ICTR began indicting and trying a number of higher-ranking people for their role in the Rwandan Genocide. The process was made more difficult because of the whereabouts of many suspects were unknown. The trials continued over the next decade and a half, including the 2008 conviction of 3 former senior Rwandan defense and military officials for organizing the genocide. Well, that was the Rwandan Genocide. Like, comment, subscribe, and and tell me any suggestions about what history videos I should do next. I will do more history videos because during the summertime, and I also graduated high school, so it would make me have more time to, make more history videos for you guys. But I am going to college, so that makes it even harder as well. So, so like, comment, subscribe, and take care.